all the important things that we are doing. I will begin by recognizing Councilmember Bob Mendez for a brief comment.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to mention briefly for colleagues who are looking at the capital improvements budget, I was advised before the meeting that there was a clerical error that was updated over the weekend. So if you looked at the CIB in the beginning of the weekend, it's different than it is now. And if I could just ask Director Darby to briefly explain what the clerical error was that was corrected.
There was a clerical error in the entry for Sports Authority. The amount was listed as $2 billion, and it should have been $2.2 billion.
Thanks. So again, it's a clerical error, but a $200 million clerical error. The stadium is in there now at $2.2 billion, not $2.0 billion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Glad we're getting started on that.
I don't think we have a quorum, do we?
Let's, now we'll move on to checking attendance, and before we officially start. Chair is here. Councilmember Druffel not here yet. Councilmember Hurt not coming. Mendez here. Pulley? Roten?
Not coming.
Not coming. Sledge? Suara? Syracuse? Toombs is here. Van Reese is out of town. And Bircher. That is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That is not a quorum. We have some presentations, so we'll put those at the beginning. And hopefully we'll have a quorum by the time we need to get to things that we vote on.
Your quorum.
Oh. Councilmember Hurt is here. Great. We do have a quorum, but we will still begin with those presentations since the people are ready to present. So I would like to invite whatever representatives from the Board of Education are here, just with some important information that will affect our evaluation of the proposed budget that is before us. Thank you for being here on short notice. And Ms. Player, I will invite you to introduce all the members of the team, if you will. I know at least 2 of these microphones work if y'all can share.
Okay, are you afterwards?
I think if you scoot that one to there, then everyone can reach something. Perfect.
Thank you, Chair Allen. We have School Board Member Emily Masters, who's Chair of our Advocacy Committee. Here to my right, we have Chris Henson, the Chief Financial Officer at Metropolitan Schools. At the administration table, we have Hank Clay, we have Sean Braystead, and Maura Sullivan, also with us from the senior team of MNPS.
Thank you. And while we are working on getting our PowerPoint on the screen, Mr. Henson, if you want to start talking, just so we can use our... All right, Ms. Player, I'll let you begin, and Rosie will, or Slade will continue working on the technical.
Thank you, council members, for having us. Thank you, Chair Allen and Vice Chair Suara. It's good to be back in chambers. It feels a little weird since post-COVID, but it's good to feel like coming back home. But also, we want to come here and just really be just transparent. As we set our schedule after the State of Metro address, we receive our allocation from the state. It was a deficit in the allocation that we were expecting and that we were considering. It was different from the public numbers that was presented to the state legislature during the conversations. And so early on, as we begin our budget process, we've always had a great relation with the Metro Council, the mayor's office, particularly in the last 2 years, having an open and honest conversation of how we have spent our allocations, where it's gone, and understanding how our budget process worked. And we started that several terms ago. with our chair, with our vice chair, Rachel Elrod, leading the conversation with Councilman Druffel and the Education Committee and the Budget Committee, really talking through the historical budget history of Metro Schools and what we're going for, particularly under Director of Schools, Adrian Battle, and how we've changed the process with the aspirational budget, and how we go into funding schools and how we approach it as a school board member, really trying to be innovative and be transparent. And so in that vein, we wanted to come before the Budget Committee and really just explain how we got here. In a perfect world, if we had this conversation literally a week earlier, we really could have worked this out through the mayor's office, but of course through the Metro Charter process. After the mayor filed his budget, that's when we were brought to light, this revelation. And so we wanted to bring this to you as soon as possible so we can continue to work in partnership like we've had, into working through the allocation for the Metro schools. And so we want to come in early on as we're currently working through our budget process, talk to you as a body, as from one body to another, and as we can come in together in partnership to help resolve this issue as we move forward during this budget process.
Thank you. Mr. Hurd is working diligently on getting visuals, but Mr. Henson, if you can paint a picture for us with words while you begin, we'll do our best to be imaginative.
Sure. Thank you, Chair Allen. And thank you for having us this afternoon. As was indicated late in the day on Friday, April 29th, we received, as did all 140 plus public school systems across the state, we received our initial estimate of state funding for next year through the BEP funding formula. As you may know, the BEP funding formula will continue to be used next year before the new funding formula is implemented in 2023-24. We had received some earlier news or estimates, I guess, through the TISA funding formula legislative discussions about a projected BEP estimate for fiscal year 2022-23 for next year. The complicating factor for Davidson County is that for any of the state-run charter schools, the funding for those students that are in the state-run charter schools comes off the top of our state BEP funding. We don't know what that amount is going to be as far as what that reduction is going to be to give us our net amount that we would actually receive. And so want to go ahead and just go through some of the factors as it relates to the fact that our BEP estimate has decreased from what was originally provided to us in March from the Tennessee Department of Education during the TISA funding formula legislative discussions to what we received, again, late in the day on April 29th. There is approximately a $22.6 million difference or gap between what we received on the 29th as our first April estimate for BEP funding and what is included in the budget ordinance that was filed. We believe there are three main factors causing this decline in state funding. The first is that Davidson County's fiscal capacity continues to increase as measured by both the TASER Fiscal Capacity Index as well as the Center for Business and Economic Research out of UT Knoxville, Dr. Bill Fox, the methodology that he uses. And so we attribute approximately $10 million of the reduction due to that increased fiscal capacity in Davidson County. One other complicating factor is that for the current fiscal year, all school districts were held harmless for any enrollment changes or any changes in fiscal capacity. And so we really didn't have a lot to go by as far as comparing to here we go. As far as comparing to, thank
Yay
you.
for Slade.
I will start back over with the three factors. So we have them up in front of everyone. You can see them on the screen. Again, we believe that the first factor would be Davidson County's increased fiscal capacity. It's measured very quite a bit of the pieces of that calculation are assessed property values as well as retail sales tax base. And I think we all know that assessed property values continue to increase in Davidson County, particularly relative to the rest of the state, the other 94 counties, as well as the retail sales tax base in Davidson County. As our fiscal capacity continues to increase, that means the state's share of funding of the different components in the BEP funding formula, the state share would continue to go down. The second factor that I mentioned earlier, an increase in enrollment for our state-funded charter schools, the state-run charter schools. We are estimating approximately $10 million of that reduction is due to a combination of increased enrollment in those state-run schools as well as an increase in the per pupil amount. As I mentioned, you can see the note here, the state reduces its funding to Davidson County by the full amount of the per pupil state and local revenue per pupil. It serves in charter schools in both the Achievement School District as well as the State Board of Education or Public Charter Commission. New schools have been approved, and existing schools continue to add new grades. And then the last factor that we believe is contributing to this, we have had an enrollment decline since the baseline year of 2019-20 that Tennessee Department of Education used as the hold harmless year. Of course, that was pre-pandemic. We have decreased in enrollment by 3,768 students from that baseline year, fiscal year 20, to the estimates that they are using for this coming fiscal year. Again, the state had frozen enrollment previously at fiscal year 20 levels, as well as the fiscal capacity index calculation. One note is that through the governor's budget that was ultimately approved by the state legislature, there was additional state funding included in that, the BEP formula for next year. And also another note, yes, we did have decreased student enrollment. We had the 26th highest percentage enrollment decrease, so it wasn't by any means tops in the state, but we have had some enrollment declines. So looking at some numbers on this particular slide, you can see that what we received at the end of April with our April estimate, and I also want to just note that this is an estimate. We'll get another estimate called the May estimate at some point. Last year, that May estimate came a little later, but with this current estimate that we've received, the total state funding for Davidson County was just under $296 million. And then you can see the reduction or deduction for the state-run charter schools, the students that are projected to be in those state-run charter schools that come off the top of our BEP funding to get our net amount, which for this April estimate was estimated at $257.7 million. So below that, the box below, the budget ordinance for state funding used approximately $280.3 million. This was what our current year BEP funding allocation is. As far as the latest information that we received from the Tennessee Department of Education for the current year, you can see as looking at our net state funding from that April estimate, or that initial estimate of $257.7 million shows that gap or that difference of $22.6 million. Just some information for you over on the right. Our total K-12 enrollment, 78,588. The state's BEP funding formula is a K-12 funding formula, so this number does not include any of our pre-K students. And also our fiscal capacity, again, which is an index of the total state being 100%. Davidson County's is the highest in the state at 17.550%. And then that local match requirement, fortunately, we don't have any trouble meeting that local match requirement, but wanted to have that out there in front of you at $420.6 million. So as indicated, the state produced BEP estimates that they provided to school districts back when TISA was being discussed in March. Those were significantly higher than what we just received as the initial estimate for next year. You can see in that left column what the enrollment that they used for the TISA projections for this coming year. Again, in March, 79,027 compared to what they're using in the estimate that they just provided at 78,588. the total state funding, total state and local funding through the formula. But what we want to concentrate on would be that state funding line, that state funding row, where in March, the number that was provided to us by the Tennessee Department of Education for our FY23 BEP estimate was a little over $312 million. And then you can see what we received at the end of April was quite a bit less than that at, again, just under $296 million, over $16 million difference from what we received in March. And then from that number, again, we don't have a good way to determine what is going to be taken off the top of our BEP funding allocation to get to our net number, since these are students that are estimated to be enrolled in those state-run charter schools that are funded basically through the BEP formula and then taken off the top of our gross BEP funding. I think, one thing that we also wanted to share would be what's been included in the BEP, in the budget ordinance for the BEP state funding over time. If you go all the way back to 17-18, you can see there was a higher number there. That was back when we anticipated additional BEP growth funds for additional student enrollment. Then our enrollment plateaued off. You can see fiscal year 18-19, a little over approximately $285.8 million. Then 19-20, $286.3 million. And you can see that it's been fairly steady and stable, but a slight decrease over time, with the latest being $280,343,000, which again matches what we are projected to currently receive in this current fiscal year. That was what was used in the budget ordinance that was filed. We did want to bring forth a few options to consider and address this gap in the state funding. The first would be fund balance, realizing that there are some limitations there, but also realizing that our fund balance is estimated to exceed $200 million at the end of this fiscal year. Has been something that's occurred in prior fiscal years. So one option that we just wanted to put out there, use fund balance to proactively address the shortfall difference between FY22 BEP funding and what they are now projecting for FY23. The second would be a council budget adjustment. Obviously, that would be something that would be up to the council, knowing that the budget is now in the council's hands. MNPS and Metro Council work to identify a solution to make up that gap. And then thirdly, federal funding and grant offset, using federal funding and grant funding where appropriate to offset FY23 BEP funding estimate. We have a number of sources there that we list as different examples. And so we wanted to go ahead and provide this information to you. We shared it immediately with the Metro Finance Department when we became aware, and also have discussed with Chair Allen and, of course, discussed with the Board of Education. So I'll turn it over to Chair Allen.
Thank you very much. I will take one or two questions. Obviously, we will be hearing from the school board at the end of our department hearings, and we just felt like it was too late to wait until then to at least make people aware that there was an issue. But we know we're not going to solve this today. So with that, I will take very quick and efficient questions. Councilmember Mendez.
Thanks. Chris, can you put that last slide back up real quick? And Chair, I'm going to just leave it to process questions because I think there's some process over the next few weeks that would be helpful to put this in context. I understand the issue and I understand the options. What I would like to avoid is that the committee and the council waits until a substitute budget shows up on June whatever for us to figure out, get a direction about where it's going. I'm assuming there's going to be ongoing conversations between management, school board, administration, finance, which there is a distinction between mayor's office and finance, and the chair. And I'm just curious about hearing more about the pacing of A, figuring out options, and then B, zeroing in. And I'm sure that I trust the chair, but the chair is going to have to pick from presumably multiple options. And I'm looking for some transparency about the details of what possible action plans are, who's going to decide that, when we're going to hear about it. And I don't know whether that's mayor's office, finance, school.
I mean, I will say just to speak in terms of the schedule that we have in front of us, the department hearings run through the 25th, and that's the Board of Education has traditionally been at the very end. So clearly we can't wait until then to begin this process, which is why they're speaking to us today. We will have an update when we hear from the board at their department hearing. My encouragement to them when this was first made known to me was certainly let's continue to look at any options we can with regard to grants and other things, so that when you come back to us, maybe we will have been able to whittle that number down from 22 to something else. In the meantime, there are ongoing discussions with finance and the mayor's office on what those options are. And I would, my recommendation is that we work this through the workshop process, not through a last minute amendment that no one will see until on June 17th. So we will have ample opportunities to discuss different options that are in front of us, beginning with the budget workshop process in June. Hearings on the 9th, June 9th is when we'll begin that workshop process. So by June 9th, we need to have the options that we are going to be considering in front of us at that point. And so my exhortation to everyone involved in this is look for as many solutions as you can and have those ready to begin discussion on June 9th. And then let's all come to the workshop sessions.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Other brief questions? We're not going to solve this, and we do have one other presentation and our full agenda in front of us. Councilmember Suara.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to recommend that for the June 9th workshop, I see that fund balance is one of the options. If the school will come with what is the minimum requirement, what is the available amounts now, so that as we're doing the workshop, we can be mindful of what is statutorily required versus what we have now. Thank you.
Thank you. Good point. Councilmember Cash.
Thank you. First, I'm disappointed in the state. We had a chance this year to increase spending for all education for students all across the state, and they failed at that, I believe. I guess, is this the final numbers, or if we get to August and we start doing attendance counts at the beginning of August and find that the expected enrollment is higher than what is now predicted, is the state contribution already locked in, or do they adjust it in August?
Councilman, there are a number of estimates that the state will provide. This initial estimate they call the April estimate, even though it was at the very end of April, which typically we would receive at mid-month and mid-April. This year we received it at the very end of the month. We'll also receive a May estimate, a June estimate, and then what they call the July final number, which really isn't final, because then we'll get a January 2023 adjustment. And so if we were to increase in enrollment, then there is something that's called BEP growth funding that can be made available. It's subject to appropriation, so there's not a set amount with whatever's been appropriated by the state legislature for school districts that are growing. So that is one possibility if, in fact, we do grow in student enrollment based upon differences in what they're using in their projections and what we actually receive.
Thanks. And we in Metro fund schools based on these numbers as well, right? Like if there's a school that loses 50 students, they might lose a 2 or 3 positions, or 1 or 2, or based on our calculations, or does that come straight from the BEP from the state?
Well, when we're funding schools through our weighted student funding formula, our student-based budgeting, we provide an estimate for our schools of what their funding allocation is going to be in the spring, based upon projected student enrollment for the next year, so that schools can begin planning, can begin hiring their staff that they're going to need for the next year. And so unless there's a significant drop-off in enrollment at a school, we typically, don't want them to have to, we don't want to have to take teachers from a school and potentially move them around after the school year started, unless there's something, that's a sizable deduction from what was projected.
Gotcha. And one more quick thing. When you say state-run charter schools, is that the Achievement School District, or is it more or less than that?
It's the 2 schools in the Achievement School District, plus I think there are going to be 4 schools in the State Board of Education / Public Charter Commission. And so I think there's a total of 6 for next year. And again, that they are part of a separate school district. They're not a part of Davidson County Schools or Metro Nashville Public Schools. They're part of a state-run school district. And the way that they are funded, as I mentioned, is that they take the full total state and local revenue per pupil estimates and multiply that by their projections of the students that are going to be in those state-run schools.
Thanks.
Thank you. So this is very important information. I appreciate y'all coming on short notice to give us the explanation behind this. That's more than, it's important to know that rather than just here, there's a $22 million hole we have to plug. So thank you so much for the detailed explanation. I'm sure y'all will be available as we ask questions. We'll put this on the budget SharePoint so that council members can study it later, and we will continue this discussion at every opportunity that we can. So thank y'all for that. We have one more very short presentation, and then we'll get to our agenda. And I'm going to ask Mr. Hurd if you can key that one up for us. As part of our budget workshop process, we frequently end up with a spreadsheet of all the items that council members have put on their wish list. So the wish list template is, there we go. The wish list template is already up on the council SharePoint and has been sent to y'all, so you can begin sending in items. Remember that if you are going to add money to one place in the budget, you have to find another place in the budget to take it from. This is a balanced budget that we've been given, and we have to pass a balanced budget. So part of the process for deciding which of those wish list items we think should be the top priority, we have done that in various ways. We sit around a table and we talk about all the options, and sometimes we vote, whatever. This year, we are going to pilot a program that has been developed by a group called Radical Exchange. They presented this at the GFOA, which is, help me, Mr. Mendez, General Government Finance Officers Association, which is the best practices organization that we base most of our, the way we do our budget on. So they are learning how cities make decisions, and we are learning from them if this is a tool that would be useful for us. So in this year, we will have, this is simply a prioritization process that they're going to explain today because it's a little bit wonky. And then we will, again, hear this explanation as we go through the budget wish list process. It will provide a way for people to weigh in and say, of all the 15 things that we have to choose from, or 25 or whatever, these are our top priorities. So with that, Mr. Slade, can I turn it over to you and Matt Pruitt at Radical Exchange? Will the voice come? Okay. All right, Radical Exchange, we appreciate y'all being here virtually, and we'll turn it over to y'all.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Chair Allen. Thank you, council members. We're really honored to be presenting this today. We are from Radical Exchange Foundation, which is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization. Our mission is to essentially take ideas from game theory and mechanism design that we think can improve the functioning of basic institutions in democracy and markets, and apply them in an effort to revitalize decision-making processes, democratic processes, make markets fairer, and lots of other things like that. What we will present today is a tool that we're going to make available to you to facilitate the decision about the budget wish list, which is called Quadratic Voting. It's a very interesting tool, which I'm going to present very quickly. I'm sure that there will be some questions afterwards, which we'll be happy to help answer later, but I will try to be quite concise. So the way to think about quadratic voting is it's a way of improving group decision making. Essentially it's like an improvement of a voting process. You can think of it kind of in the same category as like ranked choice voting, which you may be familiar with. But it works a little bit differently and has some other interesting features. The way that it works is, if you imagine in a regular vote, people have sort of a a list of different options they're deciding between, that they're deciding on, lists of different issues, and everybody kind of gets one vote on each issue. So you can vote yes on that item, no on that item, yes on the next item, et cetera. In quadratic voting, instead of this, everybody begins the process with an equal budget of voice credits. They can then allocate those voice credits between the different options that are being decided on however they want. Except there's a sort of a twist to it, because the number of sort of counted votes that you are using on each particular item is the square root of the number of voice credits that you allocate to it. So in other words, if you want to vote on item 1 once, you allocate 1 voice credit to it. If you want to vote on an item twice, you have to allocate 4 voice credits to it. And if you want to vote on an item 3 times, you have to allocate 9 voice credits to it. And this has an interesting feature, because what it means is that if you feel more strongly about a particular issue that's being decided compared to the other issues, you can express a louder opinion on it. But if you do that, then you pay a sort of a steep cost for that. I mean, in the sense that you have less ability to influence all of the other items that are being decided. This incentivizes participants in the decision process to think carefully about where they have a very strong opinion and where they don't have such a strong opinion. And by gathering that sort of information about preference strength, it allows groups to make more nuanced compromises between sort of complex ranges of issues. Just to elaborate on it a little bit more, as I just explained, it's like, this graphic sort of shows you the relationship between the number of voice credits that you're allocating to an item and the number of counted votes. So if you start out with a budget of 100 voice credits, for example, and you might be deciding on 50 different items, right? But if there's one that you feel very, very, very strongly about, you can put all of your voice credits onto that one item. So you can see that in the bottom right here. It's like, if you put all of your voice credits onto one item, you can do that. You can have a louder voice on that item, but those 100 voice credits only give you 10 votes. So if by contrast, if you had spread your votes out and just sort of allocated 1 voice credit to all the different items, you would get more say overall. So I will hand it over to my colleague, Jack, to explain an example here in more detail.
Thank you, Matt. So this slide has quite a lot of information on it, and I'll walk you through it because it might be overwhelming, but that's part of the benefit of quadratic voting. A lot more information is captured. So what's going on here with all of these boxes? So this slide will show a few things. It shows how the results of a ballot might look. It shows how people spend voice credits and how they translate into actual votes. And it also shows how the different options end up getting sorted and prioritized. So we have here, it's a group of 5 people, and they're deciding how to prioritize 5 different options. And every box shows you how many voice credits that person spent on that particular option. Now, in Alicia's case, she only cared about option 1. You can see in the top left, Alicia spent all 100 voice credits on option 1. But as Matt said, that comes at a serious cost, which is that she couldn't place a vote on anything else. In the bottom right, you can see Alicia's total votes are just 10. Compare this to Bertha on option 5 over on the right side, option 5. Bertha did something similar, nearly as extreme, placing 81 credits for 9 effective votes on option 5. Now, it turns out that was the most popular issue. It got 27 total votes, but Bertha lost a lot of voice credits that could have been spent elsewhere. And if you compare that to Charles, David, and Emily, they had a lot more overall say because they did not go all in on a particular option, the way Alicia especially did and Bertha did as well. The three of them, Charles, David, and Emily, they generally spread out their voice credits, but also they did so in different ways. And that is exactly what quadratic voting encourages, to make more nuanced and detailed compromises where you thoughtfully weigh the trade-offs and decide just how much weight and influence you want to place and where you want to place it. And then on the next slide, slide 5. So this slide shows how quadratic voting compares to other voting systems. So on the right side is traditional voting, where every person just gets one vote per option. And how it works is, if you like it, you vote yes. But if you like it a lot, you still just vote yes, and you can't express anything stronger than that. There are two problems with this. One is that if you don't care about an option, you can't really drop out of that decision because your voice credits are sort of inherently tied to that question. You can't flexibly move your voice around. And then the second problem is that if you do care about it, you can't express how strongly you care. You can just put yes. And quadratic voting addresses both concerns. It lets people drop out of the decision if they don't care, and it lets people place multiple votes if they do care. Now on the left side addresses these concerns too, actually. Systems where you have, say 100 points to allocate wherever you wish. Those kinds of things give you the flexibility to express the strength of your preference. But they actually go too far in the other direction, such that they face a new challenge, which is that voters have an incentive to go all in on their top choice to try to guarantee that it passes. And the problem here is that it causes every decision to be decided by the loudest voices in the room, and other voices get drowned out. And quadratic voting optimally accounts for this cost on other voices, actually. And it delivers richer compromises and more nuanced, deeper information about people's preferences. And I'll hand this back to Matt to continue.
Thanks, Jack. Yeah, so quadratic voting, the way to understand it is it's kind of it's a system that strikes a balance between sort of conventional voting, which doesn't gather any information about how strongly people feel, and other systems of voting that gather information about how strongly people feel, but actually, create other sorts of problems by encouraging all of the issues to be decided by the people who feel most strongly. So, quadratic voting, by striking a balance between those things, it allows essentially non-polarizing, reasonable information to sort of bubble to the top. We have worked with a bunch of different deliberative bodies to use quadratic voting in decision-making before. One example is we've been working since 2019 with the Colorado State House on quadratic voting projects. So we've worked with the Democratic caucus of the Colorado House and the Colorado Senate, as well as the Republican caucus of the Colorado Senate. What they've used it for is to prioritize appropriations bills. So essentially, they have a long list of appropriations bills, which have some support within the caucus. If they passed all of them, they would go over their budget. So they need to make an internal decision about which appropriations bills to prioritize, and they use a quadratic voting process to help them make that decision within the caucus. You can see the graph on the bottom right shows the sort of output of a quadratic voting process. That's a display of the amount of votes, the amount of support that all of the different possible appropriations bills receive within the caucus. So you can see there that what you have is a fairly detailed sort of map of the amount of support that all of the different possible options have, which you can then use to make an accurate decision about where the priorities should be. So just to sort of recap, the what quadratic voting does very nicely is it captures these sort of nuances about how strongly people feel. It results in sort of depolarizing outcomes. It gets accurate information about how strongly people feel without encouraging people to express sort of point of view that is stronger than how they feel. And it avoids some of these sort of classic problems in other democratic processes, like the sort of tyranny of the majority and the failure of capturing any information about strength of preference. So as I was saying, we've been using it for several years now in the state of Colorado. Actually, not only in the State House, but also in agency internal decisions. We've done similar projects in states and municipalities in Brazil who use it for budgeting problems. And we're really we've also used it with, for example, technical communities, people who are running technical networks who need to make complex sort of group compromises and group decisions. And we're very excited to be able to support you in this process. So I'll hand it back to Jack to explain a little bit more about what we intend to help with.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, so I'll get more concrete on the proposal here. So we understand that the mayor's operating budget has been filed and that the chair's substitute budget must be filed by June 17th. And that before then, the council will be submitting a wish list, which is considered for possible inclusion in the chair's substitute budget. And the core pitch here is that using quadratic voting can help the body reach much deeper consensus on how to prioritize wish list submissions. And the result, as Matt was saying, would be a very smooth prioritization curve, kind of a heat map signaling the submissions that have the broadest support. And then the next slide is about the timeline of this process. So we're thinking on Wednesday, June 8th. So that's when wish list submissions are finalized. And then at that point, all of the submissions can be loaded into a ballot on our Quadratic Voting voice platform. And then June 9th, the Thursday, is the first work session. At that time, the body can begin to review the ballot and get a sense of the actual procedure. And then there will be a second work session on Monday, June 13th. And then the next day, Tuesday, June 14th, would be when the quadratic vote is actually conducted. And then that would give time for the committee to review the results the next day on Wednesday. And then those results will then inform the substitute budget, and on Friday will be filed. And then the next slide is just a couple important details. The first detail is treating each submission equally. So what do I mean by that? Many wish list submissions are likely to propose funding the same thing, say, the arts, but they would take funds from different places. And there's not much information to be gleaned from someone saying that they want to fund the arts if they don't also at the same time say where the money is coming from. That's kind of a really important part of the process here. And so on the ballot, every item should also include the source of funds. And that means treating each submission equally on the ballot as a possible change to the operating budget. And then the second detail is just a way to remove any risk from this process, which is that this is not an actual vote. It's just a poll, a tool to better understand how people feel about the budget reprioritization process, and an aid to the chair in their substitute budget. So now I'll turn it back to Matt to wrap this up and put a bow on it.
I'll just conclude by saying that we will be there in person on the week of June 13th to support the process. We've built a digital tool that is very simple and intuitive to use, and so even if this sounds a little bit complicated, what we wanted to do here is essentially to present the theory behind quadratic voting, just so that you all understand. But the actual process of conducting a quadratic vote is extremely intuitive. You're essentially just moving a slider to indicate the amount of support that you wish to give to the particular options. In this case, the sort of wish list options, and we'll be there to support. And our hope is that it's a successful tool to help the committee understand better where the sort of center of gravity of support for different options lies. We are very happy to be able to do this. We think that the goal of our organization is to build systems that can kind of move democratic practice forward, that can hopefully become tools to build on to allow democratic processes to kind of work better and evolve in the 21st century. And we're really grateful and excited to be working with you all.
Great. Thank you so much for that presentation. I know that's a little in the weeds, but it's very helpful to have kind of the math explanation out of the way before we begin doing that. And I wanted as many of the council members to hear it as we can, because I would like for all council members to participate in this. There may be questions, but if you guys don't mind, we do have a detailed agenda to get in front of us as well. So unless anybody's got a burning question, we will write with questions and also plan on y'all being here on the 13th to run through whatever process questions we have at that point. Are there any? Okay, I think this group will send questions to me, which I'll forward to you, and those can be put on our website if we need to. We appreciate the explanation. We appreciate y'all being willing to work with us on helping us with the prioritization that we know is going to be complicated, so we're excited about having this tool. So I will thank y'all, and Slade, if you can sign those groups off. Thank you so much. And with that, we will begin our agenda and move through it as quickly as we can. We do have a large consent agenda, but let me know if any of these items need to be moved off. I will read through that agenda. If you need anything removed, speak out, and then we'll read the titles. On consent is RS 2022-1521, 1523, 1524, 1525, 1526, 1527. On consent, RS 2022-1529, 1530. On consent, 1532, 1533, 1534, 1535, 1536. And the last on consent are 1538, 1539, and RS 2022-1540. I did that quickly. If I need to do it again, let me know. Are there any items people want to remove from the consent agenda? As I read the titles, if you realize there's something you wanted to speak out on, it's not too late. So let me run through the titles of the items on consent. RS 2022-1522 sponsors Allen approves a grant from the Tennessee Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services to the Davidson County General Sessions Court for the Tennessee Certified Recovery Court Program. RS 2022-1523 sponsors Allen and Stiles, approves a grant from the Tennessee Department of Human Services to the Davidson County Juvenile Court to establish and enforce federal and state mandated child support program guidelines for children born out of wedlock. RS 2022-1524 sponsors Allen and Welsh, approves an amendment to the Parental Assistance Court Grant from the Tennessee Department of Human Services to the Davidson County Juvenile Court to provide opportunities to meet the needs of eligible low-income families who have a court-ordered child support obligation and to increase program participation, parenting time with their children. Also on consent, RS 2022-1525 sponsors Allen and Welsh, approves a grant from the Tennessee Department of Correction to the state trial courts for the expenses of housing and treating nonviolent felony offenders with co-occurring addictions and mental health disorders. On consent is RS 2022-1526, sponsors Allen, Welsh, and Stiles, approves a contract between the Metro Government and Ryder Integrated Logistics Incorporated for refrigerated trucks and trailers for Metro Action Commission summer food services programs. On consent, RS 2022 sponsors 1527, sponsors Allen, authorizes the Department of Law to compromise and settle the property damage claim of Hex Quality Meat Incorporated against the Metro Government in the amount of $28,554.28 to be paid out of the Self-Insured Liability Fund. Also on consent is RS 2022-1529, sponsors Allen, Evans, and Welsh, approves a grant from the National Association of County and City Health Officials to the Metro Board of Health to partner with agencies and implement activities that address the community's challenges related to drug overdose deaths. Also on consent is RS 2022-1530, sponsors Allen, Evans, Welsh, and Stiles, approves an amendment to a grant from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency to the Metro Board of Health for the ongoing collection of data for ambient air concentrations for fine particulate matter in Nashville. Also on consent is RS 2022-1532, sponsors Allen and Evans, approves amendment to a grant from the Tennessee Department of Health to the Metro Board of Health to improve health of those residing in or visiting Davidson County through targeted strategies to prevent and control the use of tobacco products. Also on consent is RS 2022-1533, sponsors Allen, Evans, Hancock, and Bradford, approves a donation of ballistic vests from Spike's Canine Fund for the Metro Police Department to protect police canines from assaults. Also on consent is RS 2022-1534, sponsors Allen and Evans, approves an intergovernmental agreement between the Metro Police Department and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers for extra-duty police services. Also on consent is RS 2022-1535, sponsors Allen, Evans, and Stiles, approves an amendment to a contract between the Metro government and Foray Technologies, LLC, to provide software services for the secure transfer of crime scene photos for the Metro Nashville Police Department. On consent is RS 2022-1536, sponsors Allen, Young, Welsh, and others, approves a bicycle and pedestrian safety grant from the Tennessee Highway Safety Office to the Nashville Department of Transportation and Multimodal Infrastructure to educate the public on pedestrian and bicycle safety awareness. On consent is RS 2022, sponsors 1538, sponsors Allen and Welsh, authorizes the Department of Law to compromise and settle the personal injury claim of Amarantha Martin against the Metro government in the amount of $16,000. Last item on consent is RS 2022-1539, sponsors Allen, Young, Stiles, and Gamble. This approves a cooperative purchasing master agreement for the trash, recycling, and brush collector and reminders, searchable recyclable database and application for the Department of Water and Sewerage Services. Is there any of those items that needs to come off of consent? Seeing none, any discussion? Are we ready to vote? Councilmember Hurt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. How is 1539 going to align, complement, or coincide with our existing situation with waste management?
Do you want to take that off consent, or is that, this is just for reminders?
Well, I mean, you asked about
Let's
a
take it off
question.
consent so we can discuss it. Anything else? Thank you. Okay, so with those items, that's everything I read except for RS 22-1539. All those in favor of the consent agenda say aye. Any opposed? How many do we have in the room? 6. All right, you approve, 6 in favor. Anyone not voting? 0 against. 6 in favor, 0 against, 0 not voting for the consent agenda. Now we'll go back to items that are not on the consent agenda, beginning with RS 2022-1529, sponsors Allen, Young, Welsh, and Hancock. This approves a memorandum of understanding between Kappa Strategies, LLC, in conjunction with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association and the Mayor's Office in participation with the technical assistance opportunity to receive urban heat island mapping for an area of 100 square miles within the city of Nashville to identify those areas that suffer from more intense heat due to the built environment. Do I have a motion? Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Any questions? Councilmember Hurt.
So it doesn't say that there's any money or anything. What's the cost associated with this?
Is there someone from the health department that would like to answer that one? Did Mr. Sharp leave? Mr. Jameson? Wait, hold on. Admin. Mr. Jameson?
There is no cost to Metro. It's free to Metro.
No cost to Metro. Good question. Any other questions? Councilmember? Okay, good. Mr. Sharp, there was a question about the urban heat island mapping. Is that in your bailiwick? Okay. We will not ask you for that one. We got the answer to the question we asked, but stick around. There may be another health question to ask you. Any other questions on the urban heat mapping question? Bill, seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Any not voting? We approve. 6 in favor, 0 against. Next is RS 2022-1520, sponsors Parker and Allen. This authorizes the Metro Mayor to submit the Nashville Davidson Home Investment Partnerships American Rescue Action Plan as a substantial amendment to the 2021-2022 annual update for a program year 4 to the 2018-2023 Consolidated Plan for Housing and Community Development to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. Do I have a motion? Been moved and seconded. Any questions on this? Since we've got, Ms. Hubbard, can you answer what this, I'm sorry, I just associate with you with home and the fair. Is that something that comes under your purview at this point?
So this is a program administered by MDHA. They have consulted with us in support of this legislation.
Thank you. And now I have MDHA.
Sure. Emil Alexander, Director of Community Development at MDHA. Again, this is $9.3 million in home funding. It's a special allocation that's coming through the American Rescue Plan. This approval today authorized us to submit this plan onto HUD, which allocates that funding based on eligible activities that HUD has already prescribed.
Great. Thank you. Any other questions? We appreciate you waiting so you can answer that question. Thank you. With that, we're ready to vote. All those in favor? Any opposed? We recommend approval. 6 in favor, 0 against. Next is RS 2022-1521. Sponsors Allen approves an amendment to a contract between the Metro government and Pictometry International Corp. to provide digital orthophoto and oblique images, maintenance, and other related services. Do I have a motion? It's been moved and seconded. Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Any not voting? We recommend approval. 6 in favor, 0 against, 0 not voting. Next item is RS 2022-1528, sponsors O'Connell and Allen. Approves an amendment to the purchase and sale agreement between the Metro government and Piedmont Natural Gas Company for a parcel of property and improvements located at 800 2nd Avenue North. Do I have a motion? Been moved. Second? Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions on this? Councilmember Sawara.
Thank you, Chair. And maybe Mr. James can explain this. Looking at the analysis, it says we're going to, the purchase price is reduced by $250,000 because we're now meeting the purchase date, and every time we miss it, there'll be $250 reduction. Is there any reason, is there any explanation why we did not meet it and we're paying $250?
So we haven't not yet made it, but we anticipate that because we would have to transfer some departments to brand new facilities. Social Services is there, Metro Action Commission is there, and finding affordable and reasonable space for those new departments to go is difficult in this real estate market, as you can imagine. So this is a schedule of allowed 6-month extensions, but at the request of Piedmont, there's an incentive on our part to get this done by the end of this year, or at least by the end of next year. The next 6-month extension is there's no penalty. But after that, if we get to a year, then you start with every 6-month increment a $250,000 penalty. And then once you get to your 5th penalty, in other words, 2.5 years out, then it's a real significant incentive, $500,000. But we're fairly confident we will have them have those departments relocated and have the property vacated well in advance.
So are we saying that we are anticipating we will pay the first $250, or are we saying we think we will meet the deadline even before the first $250?
I'm going to do what I should have done earlier and ask if Mr. Cross could comment on the exact status of the negotiations with Piedmont.
Under the contract as it is unamended, we are supposed to close in December of this year. Under this amendment, we would have another 6 months for free that would allow us that additional time to find space for MAC and social services. And I believe public property feels that they can get it done in that amount of time.
Thank you. Can I just ask for a reminder of, I know there were some issues with environmental mitigation that we would rather have someone else deal with. Are those issues that only have to be dealt with if we sold the building, or is it in the long run not necessarily a very healthy place for our employees to be? Is that why we're moving out, when it's so difficult to find other space?
We check regularly. We have an environmental consultant that does an investigation. And in fact, in order to exercise our rights to extend the closing date, we have to provide a report to Piedmont. Both Piedmont and we are concerned about the long-term prospects for the environmental residue from the manufactured gas operation drifting off-site. It does not currently pose any risk to the employees in the building.
So it's off-site drift that we are concerned with, and we'd rather them deal with that than us. There's no threat to our employees.
I don't remember exactly what the estimated cost of cleanup was, but it was in the $25 million.
Okay, and we got to do it. Okay, I just wanted to understand that better, so thank you. Any other questions on that? Seeing none, we are ready to vote. All those in favor say aye. Thank you. Any opposed? Any not voting? We recommend approval. 6 in favor, 0 against. Next is RS 2022-1531. Sponsors Allen, Evans, Welsh, and others. Approves an amendment to a grant from the Tennessee Department of Health to the Metro Board of Health to add additional epidemiology and laboratory capacity for enhanced detection for COVID response. Been moved and seconded. Any questions? Mr. Sharp, I do have a question, so thank you for sticking around. I have noticed that on the A-Safe Nashville website where the dashboard is, we are officially no longer adding new data about current cases, and I'm sure it's getting harder to get that because the testing stations are gradually closing. But can you just speak to how we're keeping track of how we're doing?
I'd say it's really hard for us to do to keep up with all the tests at this point because so many of them are being done at home.
At home.
So we don't really have a really good handle. I mean, we know how many we do, which is not a great number now. As you know, they closed one of the testing centers. So the number of tests is really kind of, we're not really sure.
Thank you. And so can you explain then where the enhanced detection for COVID response, I mean, what is that? Is that part of the testing?
So this grant, if you recall, in the very early days of the plague, we got a massive influx of money. The total of this grant is somewhere in the neighborhood of $31 million, and it started in early 20. We have spent the bulk of that in the 22 fiscal year, so in this fiscal year, on all manner of things. Basically, everything in our COVID response, from temp staff to water testing to just everything that we do. There was an end date to that grant, which is approaching. And so in effect, we've still got this amount of money left for whatever we're doing, all the things that we're doing. And so this will allow us to continue spending that. There will be another one of these at the end of this fiscal year to continue allowing us access to that pot of money going forward from that point.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. Thank you for that explanation. Any other questions for Mr. Sharp? Appreciate you being here. Seeing none, we're ready to vote. All those in favor? Any opposed? Any not voting? We recommend approval. 6 in favor, 0 against, 0 not voting. Next is late filed resolution, RS, it does not have a number. Councilmember Johnson, thank you for waiting patiently. This amends resolution RS 2021-1201 determining to issue general obligation bonds of the Metro government to reallocate funding. Can I get someone to make the motion? That's been moved and seconded. Councilmember Johnston, you're recognized.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to be suspending the rules on this. I wanted to have the conversation here first, and I don't know that I want the committee to actually make a recommendation because I want it to be re-referred for next meeting because I do think we're going to be deferring all three of these things that are sort of related. But I did want to have the conversation. I think it's important to have this conversation now because it is a little bit complicated. So the first resolution that is late actually would reallocate the funding that is in the CSP that has already passed for the acquisition of the property at 88 Hermitage Avenue. Last meeting, Councilman Sledge asked the question, if we don't purchase this, where does the $20 million go? I'm not sure why that question wasn't answered, but when you have an allocation that is passed in a CSP, the only way to get it out of the black hole is to reallocate it or to reduce the CSP legislatively. So understanding that the Parks Department was supposed to be the one that was going to be purchasing, or we were purchasing on behalf of Parks, I know that we have a huge deficit in the repairs and maintenance needs across the county for all of our parks, greenways, just parks property in general. So I asked what that list was. This list is 16 months old, number one. And so you have to take into account new pricing, inflation, new needs. But that total is $92,851,250. There are 6 categories in this, and I'll have this for everyone tomorrow. I'm going to be killing some trees. But shelters, athletic and parking lot lighting, fencing, irrigation, various hardscapes, and fountains have not even been assessed. So we're well into the 7 figures of deferred maintenance on what we already own. So then I asked, out of this 92 or 100 plus million dollars of need, what is the priority? So I have that list here too, and I asked them to keep it to the 20 million, just to make it simple for me. So all this is an option. If we choose to not move forward with the acquisition of 88 Hermitage Avenue for whatever reason, I would like to invest in our current parks system so that we can get our playgrounds and our tennis courts and our basketball courts and lighting and paving and all of those needs so that our public can go and enjoy what we already have. So that is all this is, and I'm happy to talk about it. I just wanted to give an option.
Thank you. Councilmember Mendez and then Hurt.
So I heard a reference to the legislation for 88 Hermitage may be deferred. And I guess I'm looking to the administration. Is it being deferred? Because if so, then we don't need to really talk about this very much.
I'm giving you the mic. You're on. Nope.
Councilmember Johnston had included in the packet a request for an inspection of the site, which makes sense, inspection before acquisition. We wanted to broaden that to any council member that would be interested in appearing. That has certain notice requirements, so we couldn't schedule that before tomorrow's vote. So our suggestion is let us schedule that site visit for any council members that are interested that would necessarily defer this one meeting. I will note that the state is not thrilled with our approach, but we understand as long as they have it closed by the end of the fiscal year, the end of June, that a June 7th consideration would meet their timing requirements. That is an assumption on our part, but that will allow us the ability to schedule inspection of the facility and the full site, hopefully together with representatives from MDHA, Metro Parks, and the state to discuss the opportunities for the full site in each parcel.
All right, well, thanks a lot, Mr. Jameson. Then anything I have, I'll just save to our next meeting. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Councilmember Hurt, did you want to speak?
Well, I won't elaborate much considering that it's going to be deferred, but I wholeheartedly agree with Councilmember Johnston in terms of taking care of the parks and things that we already have. That provides an outlet for a lot of our youth that need places to go. And I know Luby was without air conditioning and the pool and many things that provided them with something to do. And you know, they say that an idle mind is a devil's workshop. And we see a lot of things occurring that we don't want to see. And anything we can do to mitigate that, I think that we should. So thank you, Councilmember Johnston, for your in-depth research.
Thank you. And can I ask Ms. Darby to, just in terms of process, if the council member is intending to re-refer this, is there benefit or detriment to our making a recommendation at this point, or is it more appropriate for us not to vote?
I think you can vote to defer or not make a recommendation at this point because you would want to come back and have it heard before this committee again.
Okay. So I think I need someone on the committee to make a motion to defer.
And
Give
I
me a
would,
mic.
because if a committee defers for 1 week, it's an automatic deferral. I do want to have a little bit of conversation on the floor again to explain what the option is, why, and all that. We don't have to go into some dissertation about it, but I would like to have at least an opportunity for brief conversation about it on the floor. Again, this is in my mind, this is a big decision. So I would prefer it if you guys would not take action and we will re-refer this back next meeting.
Councilmember Mendez.
Yeah, I think with this being late filed, and so it's not really technically before us, I appreciate it being on our agenda so we could talk about it, but I don't think we need to take action and would recommend we just move on to the next item if there's no objection.
Any objection to that recommendation? Appreciate the discussion, and thank you for getting it in front of us so we can be aware of that. So with that, there is another late filed resolution by Councilmember Johnston that requests an inspection of the condition and cost of rehabilitation of the structure located at 88 Hermitage Avenue property to be made prior to the acquisition of this property by the Metropolitan government. Do I have a motion? It's been moved and seconded. Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you. Again, same process. I'll suspend the rules to get it on the floor to discuss it briefly. But I will defer so that everything tracks at the same time. We can walk through what we want. But the whole reason that we didn't purchase this property in 2019 was because we couldn't get assurances from MNPS that they wouldn't demolish the property. And it was the will of that previous body that decided we wouldn't purchase it because we wanted to save the actual structure. There's no question it's historical. What was in that building was special. The architecture is special, and on and on. But if the point is to save the structure, it is not in good condition. That's in the appraisal report. And so nobody in this room in their right mind would purchase a property without knowing exactly what the costs are to renovate and restore that property, or even first to look at it to say, let's get a structural engineering report to find out if it's even salvageable, because I've heard it's in quite a bit of disrepair. So why would we purchase a property to save the property and then end up having to demolish it or not know exactly what that fiscal note is beyond the purchase price? So it's just prudent to require some type of inspection along with estimated costs for repair, so that we know exactly. I mean, we're the stewards of our financial dollars, our taxpayer dollars. So we need to know what this project is going to cost in its entirety, not just to acquire it to have the opportunity to spend more money to fix it up.
So,
Part of this also, and I need to look at what was actually filed, is to require the appropriate appraisal. The appraisal that's before us is irrelevant. And I've got it separate. I mean, I'll have all this for you guys tomorrow. But the highest and best use as determined by this is the demolition of the existing improvement to make way for multi-story mixed-use redevelopment. So it was based on the sales comparison approach where they used things like Marathon Village. That's not what we're using this property for. So if we were a developer, then yes, the $20 million appraisal would be appropriate because we're going to be using it for its quote-unquote highest and best use. That's not what we're doing. So it's my opinion that we should be using the cost approach, which is based on the estimated reproduction or replacement cost of the improvements, less accrued depreciation plus land value. That's what the value is to us, because that's what we plan to do with this property. And so having an appropriate appraisal, obviously, I mean, the market value, anyway, this $20 million appraisal to me is not what the value is to us based off of our use. So inspection, estimated cost of repair, and also a valid for our use appraisal.
So, Councilmember Johnston, it seems that this needs to be passed so that we know that inspection is happening, so that we can then come back at the next meeting and talk about the bond issue. So, are you not planning to move that? Are you planning?
That's a good point, Chair Allen. So, I'm happy to pass all of this, to be honest with you. I'm trying to be accommodating.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it seems like this one needs to pass and the other one doesn't. I mean, shouldn't. So do you want to treat them the same way, or are we treating them differently?
No, I guess we are going to treat them differently. Yeah, so I'll move this and hope to pass it so that we can do our due diligence before we spend $20 million on a property that we don't even know we could fix.
That seems, and I think there was a motion to pass, so that's what's on the floor at this point. Is there any further discussion? Councilmember Mendez.
I appreciate the council member's comments. I would give her a slight heads up that every argument she made is one that caused me to be the horribly lose the global mall vote just a few weeks ago with precisely the same arguments. So when you say nobody in their right mind would do that, you need to be a little careful about that, because there's a recent example. That's my only comment. Thanks.
Fair enough. Okay, we have a motion on the floor to pass this late filed resolution. And this one would not need to be re-referred. It's a resolution. Okay, so we have a motion to pass. Any other further discussion from any left-brained people? Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye. I can't tell. Any opposed? One abstention. All right, anybody else going to claim what you're doing? If not, I will assume that you were one of those silent ayes that we've had all night long. So with that, I have 5 in favor, 0 against, 1 abstaining to approve this late filed resolution. This one says that we need to have an inspection. You're for that one? Okay, so we're in 6 in favor, 0 against. And I'm told that I missed one? Yes, 15. Ranked choice voting. Where was Councilmember Rosenberg? He would have loved that. We are going back to RS 2022-1539. Councilmember Hurt had a question on this one. Sponsors Allen Young, Stiles & Gamble. Approves a cooperative purchasing master agreement for a trash recycling and brush calendar and reminders, searchable recycling database and application for the Department of Water and Sewage Services. Do I have a motion? Been moved and seconded, and Sharon Smith and Jim Harmon have very patiently waited so they can explain what this is to us. So with that, please tell us what this is and how it interacts with the waste management.
So this
contract
is a contract with the company that creates the web-based widget where people can look up their collection day. They can see their collection schedule. They can also look up either on their computer or on their phone with the app to see what can and cannot go in your recycling cart. Also links you to, for example, if it's something that can go to a recycling drop-off site or a convenience center, it will direct you to the closest one. People can sign up for reminders. That basically sums it up.
Thank you very much. Any further questions? So this just lets people know when their trash is supposed to be picked up so that they can let anybody know if it happens to be late. Councilmember Henderson.
Thank you so much, Ms. Smith. Can I just clarify? I know we've had kind of not necessarily dueling platforms, but we had sort of a legacy platform of where people got reminders, and then we had the app. And can you share, are we getting everything consolidated into one thing? So I know some constituents have sort of a legacy where they went online, they signed up for their brush reminder or their trash and recycle reminder. And it seems to me that we've had kind of two things working in tandem with each other. Can you sort of speak to that? Are they coming together to be one?
Yeah, they
unified?
should be. I know we don't support any of the old recycling and trash. The app and the web-based widget is also used for brush collection. And what I don't know is if NDOT is still doing both. But I know that they are promoting sending their brush customers over to the app. So I'm assuming that that one has gone away. But I don't know that for a fact. We'd have to find out from NDOT.
That would be great if you could just follow up with us on that. Thank you so much.
Okay, so I think we gave you some homework. Can you check with NDOT on that? And
yep, absolutely.
Awesome, thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, all those in favor of RS 2022-1539 indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? Any not voting? You vote in favor. We have one more. BL 2022-1169, sponsors Benedict Allen and Withers. This approves a lease agreement between the Metro Board of Education and East End Prep. This was deferred at the planning committee meeting, and I'm a sponsor on this, so I would also move for a deferral, which I think happens automatically anyway. Is that correct? So we don't even need to vote, is that?
It'll be automatic because of the last deferral.
Okay, so it will be deferred. Any other issues that need to come before? Thank you all so much. I know this was a long meeting, but there were things that just needed to happen at this point in the budget cycle. So please remember that our department hearings will begin on the 18th, which is 2 days. And they will be here, and we have reduced the number of departments that are coming so that those can be meaningful hearings. The budget book is available online. There should be hard copies available tomorrow, I believe, for those council members who asked for them. And all the departments have spent a lot of time filling out the questionnaire as well, which is also on our SharePoint website. I sent y'all a letter that tells you how to get to there in case you continue to forget it, as I do. So thanks for all the work that we're going to be doing in the next month. We got a budget to pass. Thank you. We are adjourned.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.